Okay, good evening. This is the workshop of the Village Council scheduled for December 13th, 2021. Mary, could you please call the roll?
Mayor D'Ambra.
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone. Councilmember Brandon.
Here.
Councilmember Prince. Councilmember Young.
Here.
Can I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's approved unanimously. Okay, first up is the strategic plan update. Mr. Allen, this is you.
All right, I figure, it's at the pleasure of the council, I'll kind of give a high level of these initiatives, try to go somewhat at a reasonable pace, and then if you guys have questions, we can circle back to any of the items that you guys want to discuss, if that sounds good. So just going through the first one and go down through the list, we have prioritized our grants. We get a list of grants that we have applied for, and you guys get an update on those. We have funded 2 of the grants. We no longer need the Paradise Park grant, at least at this point. We could still pursue that if the property's still available at that time. So don't have to necessarily go away with those funds. The second one is we have met our unassigned fund balance, so we are back to where we need to be with a 17%. As we talked about at the last meeting, we are going to try to look at a 25% fund balance policy, and we'll bring that back to you guys in the coming months. But we are back to that, and Hugh provided that update for you guys last meeting. We didn't have it when I put this together for this agenda, so it doesn't show the updated balance on there. Increased communication and transparency. I think we've done a good job with that. Our clerk's office, we do our Friday news. We did hire a staff member to help with communication. So I think we're on track with that. If there's something else, we're also reporting after the council meetings the action that council takes, and putting that out there. If there's some other additional items that you guys would like to see, we can obviously do that. Update to the village charter. Our charter review committee is finalizing that. They had their, I don't want to say final meeting because they're going to go over the questions, but they are on track to bring that to council in February for final approval. They have went through the entire charter and have their recommendations now. Keith is finalizing the questions that would go on the ballot. So that is on track. The next one is we're in infrastructure, the roads, plan the annual street maintenance. That was brought to you guys for approval. I believe we're going to be kicking that off in January of starting this portion or a portion of this phase will continue in January. Same thing with the sidewalk program. We have approved it, and that'll be kicking off in January as well. I think I just signed the permits for those to get going. The Seek Alternative Transportation, there was a conversation early or last year of getting seeking this alternative transportation. At the time, the grant had passed with FDOT. Even with that, we tried looking for 100% funding for them. They said that wasn't available. It'd be 50%. So the cost to do like alternative transportation is costly. I don't know that the juice is worth the squeeze. We'll continue to look at that and look for funding, but at this point, I don't think it's in our budget to pursue that as we go forward, but we'll look for some cheaper options and continue to look at that. I know there was conversation about trying to reach out to the other municipalities to participate. I did reach out to Jupiter. They didn't want any part of it at the time. Maybe with a new manager, maybe there'll be some other conversation that we can have. Seek solutions for underground utilities. We did get a quote from FP&L. That'd be $26 million to underground the village of Tequesta. We're still looking for alternative alternative financing options for that. At this time, it's not in the budget to do that. We'll continue to look for other avenues to pursue. And if there's additional direction you want to give staff, we can look at. The long-term building maintenance, this did come up last time. I think Ms. Young asked for kind of an update, a more breakdown. I have included that in your packet. So it breaks down the buildings and then the projected expenditures for those. Economic development, and this is the annexation plans. I know at the previous time we talked about annexation, council said that we were going to hold off on future talks until after the budget process. So at this point, I'm kind of looking for direction from council on where you guys want to go with this, if we want to continue to have conversations or bring it up in a future meeting. I know that the mayor and myself have both been active on trying to get something up at the state level and trying to kind of work that angle. But if we want to continue to have conversations here at the local level on the next steps, we can do that. The impact of COVID, as you guys know, we hired a coordinator to help with that and the bridge impacts. Hopefully that communication will help. That was kind of one of those initiatives that we were tackling. If there's, as we kind of move closer toward the bridge closure, we'll continue to look at ways how we can increase communication, help out our local businesses. Overside, Development Recreation Center, we are on track. We're trending, I think February 17th is the substantial completion date. So schedule-wise, we're doing well. We've had some change orders based on, trying to get parts and materials, so that set us back a little bit. I think on the contingency money, we still have intact, so we should be getting some money back, assuming that we continue to trend the way that we're doing. In the next month or so, we'll be bringing, next month to two, before March, we'll be bringing you guys some policies to approve. So that'll be coming in the next month or two. Long-term strategy for Parks and Rec space, we've been going through that process. Nielsen and I have met with a handful of people in the community and done interviews. We've had 200 and almost 300 people that have completed their survey. We plan on continuing the survey through the end of December, and then once it's done, Nielsen and her team will spend January and February putting together a draft report and a draft plan. Then it'll work its way back through EAC, planning and zoning, and the people who have came and interviewed with us. And hopefully we're looking at an April or May council approval of that plan after we work through that. The prepare strategy of Magic of Tequesta. Now this is kind of a two-part, because there's another initiative that is tied to it with code updates. But we in your packet on the first page, we have a list of people who have applied or showed interest and want to be on the host committee. It'd be great tonight if we could come to consensus on that host committee. It's not an official sunshine committee, but if there's any other names you guys want us to look at, we can do that. And once we plan on kicking off the charrette in April, and so leading up to that, Treasure Coast Planning Council will be interviewing key stakeholders, staff. We'll be planning that process and getting some information from NILSA and background and historical. So we're on track with that initiative. We're looking at April, and then ultimately go through the couple months of approval, come back to council. We hope to get it approved before the end of the year. Establish a quiet zone, railroad crossings. I know Doug has a meeting, I think the 4th of January, if I'm correct. I know it's the first week of January, so we are pursuing that. They've told us all along that we couldn't establish those quiet zones until they've done the work. Obviously, they delayed the work here in Tequesta, but once that is done, we will pursue that. I know Jupiter is invited to that same meeting, because there is some ties to the railroad crossings when it comes to those quiet zones. But I believe they're in the same boat as us, as they want the quiet zones as well. So hopefully we continue down that path. I don't see any hiccups at this point, but we'll continue to look at that. And this is the other one that the charrette process was tied to for the master corridor plan. We have approved Treasure Coast Planning council to do that. And so I think that one kind of was summarized in the last one. Develop low impact development manual. Matt and his team have put that together, I think with some advisement from a consultant. We're gonna send that to the EAC in January and hopefully approval by the council in February. The country club tree enhancement, we do have $75,000 in next year's CIP as it stands right now. I know that Mr. Bradford had done an analysis of the where we were lacking trees, or from, I guess, just dying off, or some holes that were needed. We're kind of working off that analysis for the budget item, and so as we get a little closer, we'll tighten that number up and hopefully get a contractor on board to do that. So we have the consider environmental friendly policies, and the EAC continues to look at those. And we are looking at a carbon reduction, or we'll say a consultant to look at that. We come in and do an inventory of all the carbon footprint that the village, either organization-wise or the village as a whole, is doing. And that'll give us kind of the, we'll say, baseline to come up with some policies or some things that we can do to reduce that footprint. And I think that's part of this next one as well. So one of our staff members, Lynn Britt, is going to be kind of the liaison with the environmental committee and helping put that inventory together. We are partnering with ICLEI, which they have a tool that will help us track that carbon footprint. So it'll be a few month process to put that together, and then that team or that consultant or that organization will help us make recommendations on things that we can do, hopefully some steps that we can take to reduce that carbon footprint. Progress water system upgrades. We are on track with all of these. I was talking with Matt. We've either approved them or they're moving forward. I have a list. Let me go through real quick. So the first one on here is construction of 3 water main replacement projects. Those are tied to the SRF, which council just approved. The next one is design 2 water main replacement projects. We're on track with that. That was approved in October, November. And then the final design of construction of water treatment plant upgrades and energy resource improvements, that was approved in October. So we're trending for those to get them completed by the end of the year. And the next one, reliable progress stormwater upgrades. All the items on here, the pipeline is completed, and the other ones have all been permitted, and so we're on track to complete those by the end of the year. And the last one was the reliable water supply. The first one, rehabilitation of the wells RO2, 3, and 4. Those are in progress. I think we're going to be seeing some work in the next few days. Construction of number 19, or replacement. This will become the council. We're hoping to still get it done by the end of the year, but this one may spill into to the next fiscal year, just depending on the contractor and approval process. And then the last one is design of well 18, and that's on track to be completed by the end of the year as well. So it's a lot. Try to do it fairly quickly. If we want to get more detailed, we can, and so I'm open to questions, comments.
Do we want to start with item number 1 and then just see if anybody has any comments, and we'll just kind of move down through the list?
Yeah. Good idea.
Okay. So starting with item number 1, Lori, Molly, do you guys
I am
have?
going backwards. I just refreshed my memory for that grant that we had. Can that be used for design, or does it have to be used for actual construction?
The grant
For Remembrance Park, sorry.
Oh. Are we talking about the 75,000? What are we talking about?
The
$50,000
$50,000, I
Oh.
couldn't remember if it could be
For
used
that
towards
grant.
design or if it has to be go
No, it
towards
can be
construction.
for design. There's,
Okay.
I think there's 3 categories that we apply for. I think, and don't quote me on this, please, but I'm gonna try to get really close. 25,000 was for the trail portion of it. I think $15,000 was for benches, and then the $5,000 was for landscaping. And it might have been backwards. It might have been 15 for landscaping and $5,000 for benches. So it was very specific in those 3 categories, and so it didn't cover parking lot or any of that at the time.
But I think the bigger issue here is which was discussed, a couple of meetings ago, was if we hold on to the small grant, we cannot apply for the larger grant at this point in time. And the larger grant, I think, is up to, $1 million, Jeremy?
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to go forward with that grant and take a shot at it, at this time, we would have to basically give back the smaller grant and then pursue the larger opportunity.
Did you say up to $1 million?
I
So
believe it. I believe
where'd
it's-
that 150 come from? Because we were always told it could be $150,000.
I think when they, this year, the grant that we were gonna apply for Paradise Park was not funded, but the grant program that is used for things like, that we wanna use it for Paradise Park was significantly increased in its funding. So I believe, as I understood it, that the maximum amount that you could apply for had also increased along with that, so that there was a maximum of $1 million. Am I correct?
Yeah, that sounds right. It's not the purchase of land necessarily, it's the development of a park. There is a $1 million grant out there, but like the mayor says, we can't have 2 grants out there outstanding. We'd have to give up the $50,000 grant and then reapply for the $1 million grant.
Would it be a full $1 million that people would be seeking, or up to? So you can
Up
get any
to.
portion?
Up to. Yeah.
And I think, and what the cost estimate we had for Remembrance Park, obviously it depends on what we ultimately do with it, but I think there wasn't a cost estimate out there somewhere in the neighborhood of 750 to 800,000, maybe even a little more.
I mean, we budgeted for the construction plans at 15% of 500,000. So, I mean, that's how we got that number. I mean, I think, with all the conversation and the survey, I mean, I don't think we're thinking, I don't think we're going in, very extravagant, but sometimes landscaping costs more than, fixtures sometimes too. So, I think we'll just phase it in and whatever the budget, we come up with based on the concept that we come up with. But I was working off $500,000, if that answers your question.
Let's just hypothetically say we gave back the $50,000 grant. When would the application need to be submitted for the other one, date-wise, year-wise?
I don't have that information. I can get it for you.
I mean, okay, what's the crunch time that we have to make this decision? Is it March? Is it September?
I don't recall what.
I know I'm asking, so
Yeah, I don't recall what the deadline was on that.
I can find out. I don't think we ever really talked about that. When our grant writer, Ryan, who does a lot of our parks grants, he's the one that threw that one out there, but told us we had limitations because we already had one out there. So we didn't really talk about dates at the time.
and the $1 million, or up to
Up
$1
to.
million grant, is it every year? And is there when was the last time they did something like that? Like, kind of how I had statistics for the other grant we were looking at. I want to see how many people actually apply for it, what we'd be up against, what the other projects have been submitted. Because we're going to be submitting for a passive park, not necessarily, maybe other municipalities are submitting something more grandiose, and I want to see what the competition is.
I think that's information Ryan could probably develop for us.
Mhm.
Yeah, just want to know what we're working with.
It's a good question. I mean, obviously, we're not gonna make this decision tonight. This is a decision we should make we're not in a voting situation anyways, it's a workshop, but we'd wanna have the full council obviously on board before we make a determination, so.
Okay. That info will help though, some
Yeah.
backing.
Yeah, I want to understand because I pulled up the grant worksheet from the council meeting last week. So I know it just says the grantor's DEP. So I guess just more information on what a specific grant it was versus the one that you guys are talking about. And then I know the termination date on the grant budget worksheet says 2022. I think you confirmed it's actually 2023. Is that accurate, Jeremy? So just, I want to make sure we have our time frames right for everything too.
So that grant doesn't expire until April of '23.
Okay.
The one we have currently.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
so I just wanna get that updated and just make sure we have all the current information. And then if we could redistribute the early, estimate you had of 500,000, and I don't know how detailed it was.
Did that estimate include the extension around the retention area and some of the things that have since been
No, that was,
So we
you
might
know,
need to
when
update
when we
that.
got that first rendering, you know, we asked CWA and, you know, we even had Hedrick, Doug Gordon to kind of just take a glance at it and just tell us what they thought is ballpark, you know, give us something to work with. So it wasn't very detailed. I mean, you know, depending on what kind of material you want to use for the trail, what kind of trees we're planting, I mean, we can get very extravagant or not. So it was just a really ballpark number so I can come up with something for the construction plans, you know, on what that would cost. Because I figured we would phase this in, start with construction plans, and then off construction plans, we can get a more detailed estimate of what the cost is of the project.
But it did not include the corridor and then the development of the area on Riverside?
No.
Okay, so, all right. So that would be a question that maybe at least factor that in and say, okay, if that's our intent, which it sounds like it is, how much more, even if it's the best guess, what do we think that might add to the projected costs? So,
I think there's a couple of factors still that Nielsen will put together. I mean, I would say probably 50-50, but you know, some people wanted a little gazebo out there, some people didn't. So Nielsen will put those final numbers kind of together, see, because you know, obviously there's still some cost out there, but for the most part, that park is going to be passive. It's, you know, just some trails
Right.
and you know,
and a lot of landscaping.
and a lot of landscaping.
Okay. All right, moving on to the fund balance. I know we addressed this at the council meeting with you. Any questions there? Are we good?
No questions.
Okay. Then moving on to communication and transparency. I did want to bring one up issue here. I mentioned this to Jeremy. The recommendation had been that we go to smoke signals and print additionally twice a year. This came up to an earlier council a few years ago. The council was adamant that they maintain a print issue on a quarterly basis because not everybody consumes information the same way. And the feeling was that if you put it on print, everybody gets it, plus it also then is available for the businesses to have and to distribute, you know, at the places of business. There is obviously a cost, and we know costs are going up. In talking with Jeremy about it too, he talked about the idea of maybe having 2 print issues of smoke signals and then maybe 1 or 2 issues coming out of Parks and Rec. So I told him, I said, I know there was a recommendation made by staff, but I know council last time got very involved or had very specific views on the communications around smoke signals. And I said, I thought this is something that should be brought to the council and get council input on it. So I'm going to open it up and see what you guys think.
What is the push for it to be digital twice a year? Is there a reason? Just to save money?
Cost. Our contractor currently will not insure prices more than 7 days out.
Really?
So we're having, I mean, the paper cost and they're struggling. So, you know, we budgeted $20,000 in order to try to stay, you know, budget friendly. That was the idea, is that we'd cut it down to our 2 big issues, one being around the holiday period and the other one being around hurricane season. Those are our 2 biggest issues that, you know, we never have problem stuffing that issue. And the other 2, you know, obviously there's not as much, you know, content for those. We provide a digital version of all 4 of them anyways. I think we communicate more with our Friday news. I mean, everybody gets that even via text. With our work with our businesses, I mean, I just feel like we've we've done a good job with communication and summarizing council meetings. But if it's the will of the council to have 4 prints, we will. That was just our, staff, recommendation from staff was that we were gonna try to stay within budget and do the 2. So if we have money, as we open kind of the rec center, like I was telling the mayor, when he brought this up, we always did like a rec version at our other cities, so we had put out, our special events, our programming, our classes that we got going on once we open and kind of get a routine down. So there's a possibility we'd have a print copy of that would come out.
So there's only 4 a year. I'm not opposed to always keeping multi ways of communicating. There is even a person in my own house that the only way that person reads the newsletter is when it physically comes to the mailbox. He gets it, he reads it. But we also have residents that don't use the text system. So I am always an advocate for using multiple platforms. The 2 newsletters that maybe aren't as heavy, so to speak, maybe we could shop around costs for doing those a little bit differently, like you're mentioning, maybe throwing them through Parks and Rec, maybe change up printing them differently on different paper, maybe they're not as glossy and fancy, maybe do like a newspaper type kind of edition. Maybe there's just a way we can tweak it for the meantime and fit it in the budget. So maybe 2 of them will be more cost effective, maybe with a different vendor, and then keep the 2 big heavy ones with the hurricane season and everything else in it, and then the holiday one a little extra.
Well, and if you wanted, and if Parks and Rec was going to put out 1 or 2 printed publications as well, you could maybe combine in the off periods, combine the 2 together. I think my issue and what I said, Jeremy, simply was that we know everybody doesn't consume information the same way. And to your point, there are people that texting, that's not their preferred means. Computers, not everybody's computer literate. The older people, a lot of times prefer, a hard copy that they can read. And if you're coming into town as a visitor or a prospective homeowner, you may look on the website, but if you're in a restaurant and you get that hard copy and read it, and you say, hey, God, this is kind of nice, telling us what's going on in the community. So, again, I understand the cost pressures, and Jeremy and I did talk about this, but like I said, I felt that it really should come to the council. The council should really weigh in on this and ultimately, make a recommendation back as to how we want to proceed.
Right, well, right off the top of my head, my suggestion would be let's look at different methods of printing and just find other options to tweak it for now. Again, if it comes back really having cost, then we have to look at it again, and maybe we'll have to make that decision and not do them, but I don't have those answers. Maybe it's cheaper to print on a different type of paper.
Molly, what do you think?
I understand the pricing's volatile right now, but how much are you projected to go over budget this year with that?
We're having trouble projecting that. I mean, we may be $3,000 or $4,000 over budget, not a whole lot, but I mean, we're having projecting because we can't even get prices past 7 days right now.
Is that just from the one vendor? Like, have we
No,
not asked anybody
we've
else?
asked all
I mean, I don't really want to switch. I like to support whoever you're
We've
using,
sent it out, the
but.
cheapest vendor, we've sent it out to multiple vendors.
Okay.
This vendor was our cheapest that could keep us right around 20,000 at today's,
Sure.
but I mean, there's no guarantee. So we can continue, we can look at some other options. We did do a survey of other cities. We got 10 responses back, and it's about across the board is like half is 5 and 5 of the cities that don't offer it anymore digitally and just went, or don't offer it a hard copy anymore, just went digital. So we're not out of line with that either.
The other data I'd like to see for all of us is, did we get heavier in those 2 editions? Are we putting so much information that cost has gone up in the past 2 years? Because maybe we have to streamline what we're putting in it and figure out other methods to put some of the information out one way, but keep those really key important things. Let's say hurricane season. Keep the really key important things in there and maybe cut out some of the ones that are extra bonus and put them somewhere else. Find some way to get them to the residents. Maybe we can slim down the package, so to speak. Maybe that'll help. Maybe we're just getting too excited or putting too much in them.
then the electronic one that went out in November, are you guys able to track how many people open it?
We are, but I don't have that we haven't pulled that information yet, so, but we'll be able to share that as soon as we get it.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be good data to have, but I'm all for multiple forms of communication, so yeah, if we can look into other options.
So, yeah, I think we can get a handle on what we're looking at as a potential budget overage. Even though I know they're saying they can't quote more than 7 days in advance, but we could probably come up with a conservative estimate, said, okay, if we did all four, even allowing for, an increase perhaps beyond what our, in discussions with them, even beyond what maybe they think is likely, if it ends up being $5,000–6,000, that might be something where we say, you know what, for this year it's worth, we'll find the money for this particular year, and then we can revisit it again, as we go into the budget process next year. But yeah, the more information we have around it, I think to both of your points, the better we'll be able to make a solid decision. Okay, we good?
I have two more
Yes.
things under this topic, communication and transparency. I don't know if we want to add this here or if we want to just add it to like our next workshop, but going back to the ordinance, effective dates, and public outreach procedures, should we add that here or just keep that separate and workshop it next month?
I think we talked about workshopping that next month.
We're gonna workshop it. I mean, it'll be on the next workshop to talk about that.
Okay.
Because
and then-
that ordinance that we just looked at is gonna be tied to that conversation, so.
Right.
Okay, and then I would like to do increased transparency on budgets and projected costs. I think, this is a sticking point for me on the agenda memos. I really like to make sure they're completely filled out with budget expenditures, so I think we've been getting better at it. What Matt's been doing with the projected, his projections and his projects is awesome. I think for larger projects, it'd be nice to kind of get in more of a, everyone doing it, and all the departments more aligned with that. So I don't know if we want to add that to here or treat that separately too, but that's something that I think we've been improving upon, and maybe just get it more aligned across the departments.
So that really feeds into what we're looking at here, so that's really an operational element that I think, Jeremy, you can handle that.
Right, but it is communication and transparency
Yes,
to the
I
public,
agree,
so
Agreed.
that's all I had.
Okay. All right, moving on to the charter committee. I know Jeremy's indicated that we're going to get a recommendation in February. I don't know if anybody's got any questions or comments on this item at this point.
I just had a question on the timeline. So when they come in February and they present their thoughts, let's say we vote to change something, when does that change get on the ballot? Would it be in March, or would we do a special election?
2023.
So it's gonna wait? Okay,
Yeah, it'll coincide with the March municipal elections.
okay, that was it.
Okay, next one, strategic initiative, public infrastructure. Questions, comments? Anybody can start, if there
I
are
don't
any.
have any.
I was just gonna ask, did staff make a decision about core sampling to Cuesta Pines? Because they were asking if they could get that done.
Didn't we say we didn't need it anymore,
Didn't need
because
it.
we,
Okay. It was just no, okay. Okay. That is all.
When the grant initiative that's underway, I know I probably asked this question before and I just don't recall the answer, that Kimberly Horn's working with us on. When do we expect to actually get a decision following the filing of that application?
Typically it's in the spring.
Okay.
Hopefully we might hear something in spring, but in the last application process, they didn't hear something until late summer, even going into September.
Okay,
So we'll see how it goes.
okay. All right, anything else on that item? We're good,
Yes, sir.
okay. Okay, the sidewalk improvement and maintenance, so this is a kind of a leveraging the prior item. Any questions or comments here?
No, I know we've all, talked about we need to fix what we have first, but I really want to talk about, or just, even if it's a couple years out, have our eyes on new sidewalks for pedestrian safety. I know there was a couple streets, I think there was one near DeQuesta Pines and then Portal Drive in the Country Club that are pretty dangerous roads and curves, and you have families biking, walking, strollers, dogs, so I think it's important from a safety standpoint to track some of the new sidewalks and see where we can fit them in, even if it's a couple years down the road.
So we do have a map showing where new or proposed sidewalks would be. We have that, I mean, we try to fit it in if we can, if you wanna start looking, put it in the capital improvement plan, 4 or 5 years out for the new stuff, but I think I'll talk with Doug, see what we can come up with for the newer sidewalks. I know we have quite a bit of repair work still to do that's in our, in the works. That's why I think I've said, as we get, if there are funds available, we really need to put more money into sidewalks, more money toward roads, because otherwise it's gonna take us forever to get there.
And some of those curved areas in Tequesta that probably could use a new sidewalk, I know that Doug has looked at those and has started strategically in his head putting together like what would need to be there, the size of the swales, drainage, and has been looking at, I wanna say grants, is that correct? Like just different things maybe to help us out in the future for that, cause I agree with that, like just keep that on the back of your mind, we gotta address that with everyone being more outdoorsy.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good suggestion. That needs to be part of the long-term capital plans. And when we do the annual update on this, I think incorporating, the diagrams or maps or, which we have in the past, but making sure we continue to include those and continue to update those and provide that backdrop.
That grant will also be a game changer if we are able to get that funding or
For
a portion
Country
of
Club.
funding, because that El Portal, we can take care of quite a bit with that grant, so that'll be a game changer too.
Okay. Next item, transportation options. I think we've talked about that in the past. Any further thoughts on that?
These are just my notes from last time we looked at this, which was, I think, some of our early budget meetings. I had a note about looking at possible mobility tax options and then also an Uber agreement. Is anyone looking into that, or did those not pan out?
Some of the mobility parts, probably a more in-depth conversation these have, because there is quite a bit of conversation, that's revolved around the surtax, and there's a lot of conversation. There's even, I know Lake Park, I think, was one that just started that route for mobility. I gotta get an update tomorrow from Gardens, but as of last month, they were right in the middle of a lawsuit for that mobility stuff, and I think it had made its way through the court, and it was going to appeals court from Gardens or something along those lines. So I think the mobility portion, I think, in my opinion, still need to kind of wait and see how that we don't want to be in the middle of any of the suits that's going on, but there's a couple of cities that is tackling it right now, and that'd be very telling for us on what we do with that. The other part is, that surtax in 2026. I mean, there's a whole movement for, mobility, that to be a mobility versus, or a transportation versus what it is now. So I think there's still a lot of moving parts for that. What was the other part of it?
Uber agreement? Didn't Jupiter do something?
So that was with, that one probably would have been best tackled with that mobility initiative that we had there. That was the alternative to that mobility option, or additional mobility is, what Jupiter did around their special events is they would have something with Uber or Lyft, and they would have this agreement. So if you're going to or from the Tequesta event, we would pay up to $25 for that ride, and then they would send us a master bill for that. And so that was what Jupiter decided to go with, and they said that people loved it, and it was very well received. We can do that. I mean, we just have to decide what events we want to run that around, or if it's going to be just ongoing. I think it might be a little much ongoing, but if we wanted to try to see how that would work around a couple events and see if it's even well used, like maybe next year's chili cook-off or something like that, just to see if it's, so could do that.
See, for me personally, we're so small, and anything that we are going to have to fork out money and pay for, I don't see where people be going right in the Tequesta line. So I know the EAC has kind of tinkered on this as well. Everything comes back very costly, that's why they kind of never came back to us. But even if you think we're the hot spots, they're all over by the inlet, well, that's Jupiter. And then if you have an event, I could see that being useful, kind of like when we used the trolleys. I mean, I loved it. That was just so easy. You don't have to deal with parking. And we do have a handful of residents that probably could use a little transportation to get to the stores or whatever. But again, is that an everyday use or is that a scheduled once a week thing? I'd like to see us try better to find a way how many residents would even use something like that. So that way, if we get to that point where we have to make that decision, we know roughly a percentage would actually use it, and how many people just use Uber because it's easier, right? Maybe we do just find a way to make a deal with them because they're gonna go over the Jupiter line, or they're gonna go up to Stewart for downtown time. Like, I'd like to see some more data, so that way we can also help the EAC kind of make better decisions. And then we can figure out as a council how much money we wanna fork out to cover the costs. I mean, if they're not even gonna be in Tequesta staying, we're gonna be paying for them to go somewhere else. I don't know, I'm a little iffy on that. I mean, but definitely events, I think could be awesome. Saves us on traffic and parking issues.
Parking, big
And then the cops are just mostly probably monitoring people crossing roads rather than dealing with cars going this way and that way. I'd like more data.
I think there's two issues here. One is in what the county's trying to do, and they tend to do this, it's one size fits all. And that's the challenge that all the municipalities faces. People, the geography, the demographics, the makeups can be very different, so the needs can be very different. To your point, Lori, I also am very concerned about spending taxpayer money on these kinds of services. To me, you've really got to look hard and say, is it really warranted? I mean, if you look at the community and you look, again, as you said, the distances that people need to traverse, et cetera, you know, at what point do we say, well, is this something taxpayers should actually be expending money on versus the individual using Uber, or Lyft, or getting a ride from a friend, or whatever the case may be. So if we're going to spend taxpayer money on this, I've got to see a real strong public interest case made that says our taxpayers ought to be paying for people to utilize these services.
That's what I want to see. I want us to try and figure out a way to find out from the public who would actually use it.
Right.
Even if it's just we're looking at a once a week for people that need to run errands and they don't want to necessarily drive themselves or they can't drive themselves. One of my concerns with the transportation companies that come in with their little mobile, they're not a golf cart, but it's the little car carts. My biggest concern was our demographic did change a lot. We have a lot of children, and my question to them was, how do you accommodate these families that might want to take a ride into town, so to speak? They need car seats, booster seats. Where do you put those if you don't have passengers that need them? And then you pick up a family. Where did you just pull out the boosters and car seats? As a mom, I know I probably wouldn't love it, but does a mom or most moms feel comfortable relying on a company to secure their child in a moving device? That's kind of why I want to look at these statistics and the percentages of who would actually use it. I think families are probably going to be more comfortable in their own setup, especially when you're talking about car seats and boosters and airbags and all that.
Well, and I think one of the challenges, I've heard this from a few people, that actually, they're saying it's difficult to actually get Uber and Lyft up here. We're at the northern end of the county, and if all you're going to do is use them for local transportation, there's not enough money in it for the drivers to actually make the trip.
I would believe that.
And transport people.
Because we don't necessarily, and I'm not knocking us as a village, but we don't necessarily have all the hottest spots. We have some awesome gems,
Right.
but we don't necessarily aren't pulling people from down in West Palm to come up here.
And we're only 2 square miles.
I want to treat our residents to what they actually need.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay. Next item was the underground utilities. It would obviously be a wonderful thing if we could accomplish this, but we do not have $26 million to underwrite the cost of this. So I think the idea of looking for, continue to look for alternative sources of financing or funding is the way to go at this point in time. I don't know if anybody's got any further thoughts on that.
I just, I know North Palm Beach just got a quote for the same, it's much more expensive than ours was, but maybe, I know they're looking for alternatives, and I'm just throwing out there, maybe keep in touch with them, see what they're
Yeah.
thinking about looking into.
The part that we talked to, like Kimley Horn, and you know, in the past process, from what I'm told, the FP&L quote is a little bit higher than probably what the actual will be. I think like Town of Palm Beach, and after their engineers and their planning process got a hold of it, they found a ton of things that they could save, but we're still talking $20 million. But I can talk to Andy. I might see him tomorrow and just see if he can share anything with me.
I didn't really have any questions other than comments. I just know that, like Molly said, the whole world is looking for resources for it. So we're very, competition's high on that one. And I mean, it's just, if there's anything else we could be doing, whether it's, I mean, anything that we could be doing in addition to what we're already doing, because I know our residents definitely want to fight for this.
Yeah, if I could add one thing,
Mhm.
in the manager's conversation and myself with Florida Power and Light, they encourage the residents, when they're having issues, even if it's a little.
To call.
Put in the phone call. Because
Or use the app to-
we were fortunate last time to get on the pilot program, because we did have those folks calling, and another city dropped out, and that's how we got on that pilot program at no cost. We don't know if there'll possibly be another pilot program, they don't have anything on the books right now, but the more residents that call when they're having little flickers
Mhm.
and electrical issues, moves you up the ladder. At some point, Florida Power and Light wants everything underground.
Some more data on their end, because I know I urge my neighbors, because my house in particular with my surrounding neighbors, we flicker all day. And anytime my AC goes on, whoop, we flicker all the time. Oh, I do. I use the app because it's easier.
Okay. The next item, the plan and fund long-term building maintenance. I know, Molly, this is near and dear to your heart, so I'm going to let you start with this.
Well, real quick,
I'm sorry.
did you want to take public comment at any period?
If anybody,
Or at the end.
if anybody wants to come up, they can. Mr. Bradford, yeah.
I didn't know if you want to wait to the end or do it.
Thank you. I didn't know whether to come now or later, but in regard to undergrounding, I was communicating with Andy at North Palm today, and they have 7,600 pieces of separate property in North Palm Beach. I don't know what ours is, maybe 3,000, 4,000, I'm not sure, in terms of units. And I think he said the estimate was like 30 million, something like that. But the thing that I wanted you to plant the seed about, that I wanted to plant the seed about for you to know, is that you don't have to borrow the 26 million. In fact, if you had a referendum in March and the people overwhelmingly approved it, you still wouldn't borrow the 26 million. You would get money in tranches. And the other thing too is you're not limited to all or nothing. Now, true, if you do all or nothing, you get a 25% discount. The government gets that, which you pass on to the people. But the other thing is this: you can do this on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. You don't have to do it any other way. And let's just say, for talking purposes, you held a petition process in Tequesta Country Club, and whatever your criteria is, you can make it 51% or it can be 60% or whatever you want. If that many people sign off, the whole neighborhood goes underground, and you do what are called non-ad valorem assessments to the property, and that ends up not technically tapping into your budget. You're actually taking those costs and passing it on to those people who have approved it in and among themselves. So I just want to make sure you all knew that.
Yeah, and I think Inland Colony offered an alternative where you could pay it all up front, or you could do a non-ad valorem assessment as well.
Absolutely. They use non-ad valorem assessments, and you can structure it so that you can prepay it at any time during the life of the loan that's been taken out to repay the debt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure you knew that. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Tom. Molly, long-term building maintenance. I'm going to let you speak to this first. Do you have anything else? you wanna add
No,
to
the
this?
breakdown's in here, so thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, it's good, and I'm glad you guys put
And I
this together.
apologize, because I've had that for a month or longer, and I hadn't shared that with you guys, so I
Jeez
apologize.
Louise.
Lori, any comments on this item?
No, sir.
Okay. Annexation plans, again, Jeremy kind of went through and gave us an overview. He and I have both been asked to serve on the Florida League of Cities Committee that is going to further address this. The issue, just from my experience with them in the last go-around this last summer, is they're not real great, they don't really develop the legislation, but they'll support it if somebody does. I indicated to Jeremy, and I've said this to Jack Corey, and I've said it to Keith, that I am more than happy to actually work on writing a piece of legislation that I think would better suit us in terms of our ability to execute on an annexation plan, which would involve both a redefinition of what it means to be an enclave. It would involve removing the county from the process of an enclave actually exists. Now, obviously, whatever is developed would have to get through the legislature, and who knows what would happen with it. But, you know, we do know we have these enclaves, we have these unincorporated pockets. Most people will readily admit they benefit from their affiliation with Questa, but many of them, as we all know, have said, I benefit, but I don't have to pay for it, so I'm kind of happy with the current arrangement. So, you know, we've made a number of efforts to move forward with annexation on a voluntary basis. That's proven challenging. We've talked about maybe restating what the value proposition is for people, and maybe that includes the recreation center. But it also means we may need to look at, you know, a legislative solution as well. And again, no guarantees there, but I think it's at least worth the effort. So those are my thoughts on this issue.
Well, I'm gonna make a request.
Yes, ma'am.
That if you choose to write anything, please share it with the manager, and then he can forward it to all 5 of us,
I
or
will.
rest 4 of us.
I will do that.
Because 1, all of our names are on it, and 2, we all make decisions for what the future's gonna
Agreed.
be for. So that would be my request, please.
Agree with you 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Lori, and I mean, I think just locally, I would say we hold on doing anything, because it's not gonna happen unless I think it comes from state.
Yeah. Don't disagree with that either. So, okay, moving on to the next item. COVID-19, US 1 bridge. Obviously, we've brought in an individual who moved over from fire onto Parks and Rec to fill this role, and I don't know if anybody has any further comments or thoughts. We've talked pretty extensively about this in the past. I know, Laura, you have, about what you were expecting and what we hope to achieve with this position. I think, Molly, you've commented on it as well, so any further thoughts at this point?
No.
Do we just want to note on here, I know we talked about evaluating the position after a year. Is that something?
I thought that was to be part of the contract, wasn't it?
Mhm.
I thought that was gonna be part of the contract, because the ARPA funds won't cover this forever. So I was under the impression that once the ARPA funds aren't really covering it, that we would reevaluate, because that's gonna be taxpayer money after that paying for it.
I would say that we evaluate all of our staff all the time, but
Yeah.
I mean, we can take approach just to see how effective we're being with this program. I think that's be something we should really be looking at. Yeah.
I think we should do it at the year mark too, just because, right, I mean, it's projected for 3 years.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think we should do it at the year mark to see how
I
it's.
think it'd be a good time to look at it, especially with the bridge coming, you know, and see if there's things, ideas that you guys have heard or that you guys have that we can, if there's something we can be doing, let's do it. You know, I think the bridge impact's could be substantial, so.
And then, who's gonna be the point person for communications and follow up with FDOT? Because, you know, Doug, you and me had the meeting with FDOT. There's some things we need to follow up, make sure they, you know, give us an answer or follow through on. Is Tessa gonna be that person now, or who's communicating with FDOT still, and does that need to?
Doug will still do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Doug can relay anything to Tessa that, you know, from a business standpoint that she can relay on. But Doug does a good job of passing it on to like Lori and their team. We get it out on social media, so we can just include Tessa as part of that process too.
I was gonna just ask a question, I guess. Given the fact that there's been some delays on the bridge, and given the fact that we're gonna have hopefully the recreation center open by end of February, maybe early March, and we've discussed the impacts, obviously, of the bridge within these chambers, and obviously people can live stream it, but we haven't done what I would call a true community-wide meeting on this. Would it make sense with the opening of the recreation center to actually have a community-wide meeting at the recreation center, either using the adult activity room or the gym, and invite the entire community in and have FDOT come in and really do a thorough presentation and a thorough update? And again, hopefully we'll get a lot of people, but really, you know, send the message out to everyone about when, where, what the impacts are going to be, how they're going to be mitigated, et cetera, and do it in a large-scale event.
I'm hesitant if it was a one-time thing, because the results that, when FDOT has done presentations before, the results have not been amazing. So if we were expecting them to keep updating our community, I think I would support more if they did periodic, more friendly updates. Maybe not such a thorough, but hey, we're shutting down this intersection on this date. That's all people care about. They don't want to know how many lights they're putting in. Usually it's, when am I going to have issues driving? So maybe we can keep it simple for them, and maybe come with Zoom it from the rec center, so that way families who can't make it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's an either or. I think
I'm just trying to see if we can make it more accessible.
Yeah, I think there should be periodic and regular updates, but I also think people need to see the forest for the trees. And I don't think much of I think there's a large segment of the community, they know it's coming, but they don't maybe fully appreciate the impacts that are going to happen, nor perhaps what efforts are being made to try and mitigate things. So, I'm just, from my point of view, I would want to see the big picture.
I'm not saying that they shouldn't put the picture, but sometimes their presentations to us are like an hour and a half long, and I mean, if we want to keep people's attention and get them the information they need, the most important topics, and then let them go into maybe more detail at the end. I would really like to see it more accessible, and instead of these big, long chunks of information, somehow see if they'd be open to, in their marketing department, doing smaller, more friendly, user-friendly versions to keep people up to date, and maybe have it Zoomed from the rec center.
Doug, what do you think?
I mean, in person too, but have it Zoomed at the same time.
But that's what I was,
Is providing a monthly update, a construction update, and we can, through the manager and the clerk,
Yeah.
provide that to the resident.
Awesome.
and that's what I was getting at with communications involved with FDOT. Who's doing that?
Yeah.
How is it getting out? Like, who's the point person for that? And does Tessa get it from you, and then that's how it gets out to the public? But yeah, we just need to come up with that
Well,
protocol.
I know they have their marketing point persons, so I
They
would,
do,
I would
yeah.
think that person would need to be on board with something, some sort of plan like this. And then, yeah, it would probably tie in at least Doug and maybe
I'm
Tessa.
already receiving the monthly updates.
I know you are, but I'm saying, like, if we were to have their point person do more user-friendly presentations more periodically to keep residents updated.
Well, I will tell you, when we rebuilt the Tequesta Bridge, and we had both the discussion meetings and the kickoff meetings for that at the Presbyterian Church, because we didn't have a place to hold a large-scale meeting. We probably had, like 350, 400 people show up. So that's what I'm saying. I think to have one, what do you want to call it, kickoff meeting or whatever you want to call it, I agree with everything you're saying, but I do think taking advantage of the new rec center as a way to actually bring people into the center as well, using that facility and having them come in. It doesn't have to be an hour and a half. We can ask them to maybe focus a little bit more on the things that are most important. But I do think there's a benefit to having the community come in and hear, again, and understand the overall plan and the impacts and how they're going to handle everything. But then that needs to be followed up, as you're saying, with the regular communications, because people will forget. And they won't be thinking, oh, on this date, this is gonna be happening. So I think the two can work together.
Sure, so what if, you could just have their team do a kickoff, like you're saying, like one big one, and then afterwards it would just be these periodic updates. And I actually think the rec center would be a great place, because it's possible we throw, if people need to bring their kids,
Yep.
you make a babysitter room and there's a bunch of games or something, and the kids can go in there, and the adults can go in there and get the information, and then,
I went to 2 of these meetings over in Jupiter, and we're not talking about a couple hundred people. We're talking about like a full house, and there's a lot of Tequesta people over there. And so if you have it over here, you're gonna have a lot of Tequesta people. You're gonna have a lot of Jupiter people. I mean, people, you're gonna get a lot. So, they have them periodically in Jupiter. If we want to have one, I'm sure FDOT wouldn't have any objection to doing one.
I think we should have one of our own.
I'm not opposed to that.
Okay. All right.
And then do you, what
Go
is,
ahead.
I know the intersection improvements were a couple months late. Has the closure been delayed too? I haven't seen any update on that.
No, it's still on
So
schedule.
it's still tracking, yeah, okay.
The only delays we're experiencing right now on the rail crossing, which is independent of the.
Right.
Okay. The Recreation Center, that's the next item. Jeremy, you mentioned coming back in, I guess maybe the workshop in February to cover some of the issues here.
Yeah, I'm looking at the agenda. It'll either be January or February, obviously, because we only got 2 shots at it. But I know we got 2 items on the workshop for for January with the ordinance and the ordinance, I guess, process. So it's possible we can get it in January.
Any thoughts or comments on this item?
Sir?
Okay. Long-term strategy for the green space. Obviously, we know that's well underway. Nelson's been working on that. She's got the surveys. I know she's been doing the individual interviews. I don't know if there's anything more to add on that, Jeremy, or?
No, I think, like I said, we're looking at like a March, April before it kind of makes its way back to council. So I think the process has been really good, and I've said this to Nilsa, I mean, she's put in a lot of energy, a lot of effort into this process already. I've been very impressed with her, just showing up to all the events, coming on weekends, nights. I think she's done a good job. Hopefully the product is as good as what effort she's put into it. So I haven't seen the product yet because we're still too early, but I think she's done a great job of really trying to solicit as much feedback as possible.
So once we get the additional information that was requested earlier, we can then, as a council, make a determination whether we want to continue with the FERDAC grant that we have now for the 50 or waive that and seek the larger grant. So, okay. Then the charrette process. Jeremy, you brought this up. I know you listed a number of people here that have applied to be part of this process.
Yeah, the only note to this is that Keith recommended that we didn't have more than 2 people from any board or commission, and I know Mr. Hackett and Liz Shower both serve on the P&Z. He said we could have 1, but he would not recommend more than 1 from that. So I think that would be your only limitation on this group here, would be that.
Okay.
And how many were you looking for again?
He said 5 to 7 is what he was saying, so I think if you limit that, I think we're at 6, right? 7.
Seven.
7, yeah.
Are any of these people business owners within the community, or are they all residents?
I'm not sure that we got that in detail with their application process.
Some of them I personally know are involved in village projects.
Okay.
Not on a board, but they're involved in village projects.
Okay.
So this is not an advisory board, just so you guys
Yeah.
know. So, it's not going to be necessarily governed by the Sunshine Law. This host committee won't be making recommendations to council. This is more for helping strategically get the word out, help set up meetings, just really the planning of the charrette process more than anything else. So,
Well, they'll be at the meetings, right? They're gonna be the ones like helping with the groups?
Well, I think that's Treasure Coast Planning's role.
And Treasure Coast is the
Okay.
one that's gonna be doing all the meetings with staff and
Okay.
that thing. The host committee is gonna be really helping leading up to the charrette process. They'll be giving, Treasure Coast a list of names that they may potentially interview, trying to get people at the charrette process. So this host committee is more of we'll say a planning committee for the charrette process.
So one more question. When we talk about, legal is advising us not to have two people from the same committee, is it just the same committee
Same board.
Same
or
board.
board?
So they're both on planning zoning.
But it could
He
be like an
doesn't want-
EAC member and a PZ
Yeah,
member?
that wouldn't be a problem. I
Okay.
think that he just wants to avoid the perception that, they're both here, then they start talking about something, then they start talking about, a code change, just that perception, and maybe it's not reality, but perception is reality, I
That's
guess.
fine. My goal is to see, I hope to see a mixture of different circles that these people will be from, because that's, for me, that's the best way to get more people informed. A little bit of everywhere.
Well, I think this is a good mix from my opinion or my knowledge of the people. I don't think any of them come from a specific area per se, so.
Does, is there any, I know they said we could either have 5 or 7, obviously they're looking for an odd number, but is there a preference, or is there a pro or con to the larger or smaller group?
No, I think you could probably approve all these minus 1 from the planning and zoning. I think it would be appropriate.
Okay.
He was saying, usually they'll have each council member appoint 1, and then maybe the manager appoints 1 to get 6 or 7. He goes, that's the standard, so.
So we don't have a full council here for consensus, but can we move this tonight, or should we put this on the agenda for the January council meeting?
Well, I've talked to Mr. Stone. He was all right with this list and just moving forward with whatever we got. He didn't have anybody else to add to the list.
Okay.
So we don't necessarily have to get approval. We can, unless there's somebody else that you guys want, or if there's any objections of somebody that's on the list, then we'll probably need to do a vote. But as long as we're good with just moving forward with 7, I'll just need to figure out which one, either Mr. Hackett or Ms. Shower is the choice. And then we can have the other ones as part of the host committee and kind of kick this process off.
Is there a preference between these 2 individuals?
Tom has something out here first.
Oh.
I had a question in regard to this. I received Laurie's Friday news update like everybody did. And I think that was the first time she mentioned the planning committee, by whatever name it is. The question I have is a person who is on the committee, is it okay for them to be a full engaged participant in the charrette process? Saying they want this, they think it should be that, et cetera, or is that considered to be out of bounds?
No, they can still be a part of the charrette process from what I understand.
You think so?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think,
All right.
that's a 4-day process, I think, as long as they're willing to come. I think, from what I'm talking to Dana, they're not prohibited from doing that, because I actually thought of a couple people at the very beginning when I had this conversation that may want to serve on the host committee, and I asked that question if they were going to be prohibited from participating in that process too, because I knew that would limit the number of people who would want to serve on the host committee, because they would want to be a part of the
Yeah.
charrette process, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I needed to know.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
I wouldn't, myself personally, I wouldn't choose a name between those 2 just yet. In fairness to them, I would like to talk to each one of them beforehand and make that decision.
Well,
Yeah, I would agree, just like we do when we select anyone for the boards or committees.
okay. I know Liz fairly well, so nothing against Mr. Hackett. I would probably be in favor of Liz, but I understand the desire and the need to speak to both individuals. So can we ask them to be at the next council meeting?
Mhm.
And then we'll have that opportunity, and then we can make a final decision.
Are we allowed to call them?
I would think you'd want them,
I do want them at the
I don't think
meeting.
there's any reason you can't, I don't think there's
I'm
any
asking
reason
for
why
just
we
a
can't.
general curiosity.
I don't think there's anything that would prevent you as.
My
an
gut
individual-
tells me there's probably nothing that prohibits you from doing
I mean,
that.
I'd rather talk to them in front
But I
of
think
all
it'd
five of us,
be a
but,
better, especially since we're talking about this process, it'd be better to do it in open forum.
that would be my preference, I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there should be a conversation with
Okay.
them and all five of us. So, okay.
How
Is
long
there
are you
any
taking
other-
applications till if more come in, or have you closed it?
I mean, since we're not deciding on it, we can keep it open until we finalize it, if that's, I think, talking with Dana, we just wanted to get this process, try to get it out as soon as possible, because if we delay, it could delay the process altogether.
Well, since we are going to at least hear from the two that we have to decide between, I wouldn't mind if any of them are available to at least come and, like Ms. McGill said, they always come, introduce himself, some of them, I don't know one of them, so I at least wanna see the face of who's gonna be out, helping us.
Yeah. we can-
And then if anyone does submit a new one, again, we'll just have to make that decision.
Mhm.
I always like to talk to people and feel them out, though.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important process, so I think it would benefit for us to meet all of them if they're willing to come.
Okay.
Well, it's definitely an important project for the village, there's no question about that.
That's why
Okay.
I think we should take
All
it
right, so
seriously.
we'll invite them all, and as you said, if any new ones apply, we'll include them in the list, the group as well, and then we can address that at the next council meeting. Okay, the railroad crossing situation, I think we've talked about this before. All three crossings have to be improved upon, Riverside, Questa Drive, and County Line, before we're in a position to apply. Doug, once those three are done, I think we can apply for this arena that affects us, but since one of them is in Jupiter, do all the Jupiter crossings also have to be addressed before we can apply? Are we tied to that, to their improvements as well?
The manager mentioned on January 4th would be helpful in answering some of those questions, but yeah, it would be helpful if we sort of tag team, should try and partner with Jupiter at the same time.
Okay.
We all want the same goal.
I thought Riverside, we have to with Riverside, right?
We do.
Yeah, so,
So my question really was, if Riverside's done, but let's say there's other crossings in Jupiter that are not,
further
Jupiter
south,
cannot
right.
apply, but could we apply independent of Jupiter? That's really the question, if Riverside is done, even though Jupiter as a whole wouldn't qualify at that point. So that's why I was asking that.
Yeah, I'll find out if we meet on January 4th.
Okay. The corridor enhancements, again, that's the charrette, and we've already approved that expenditure. Any further comments, thoughts? Okay.
No, sorry.
The low-impact development manual, that's already being worked on, it's already underway. Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or
No, not unless there's any questions on it.
any questions or comments? Okay. The country club tree enhancement, again, thoughts, comments?
My only question was, do we have an idea yet, and how many trees we would need to fill it in with?
I can send that to you. Mr. Bradford did an analysis on it. I can send that to you.
Just a rough number, so we,
It's on our capital improvement plan, and there's attachments that go with that. So if you click on our capital improvement, you can click on the link, and it'll bring that up. But then I found out yesterday that link was broken, but it was available for a long time. I'm not sure what happened.
and the other question I get asked from Environmental Friendly in Tequesta, people sometimes ask, are we doing young trees or mature trees? Because sometimes the young ones can root better, and you can kind of, if you plant them correctly, you can try and train their roots to go down. Or are we gonna put in mature ones that might not take as well? Has that decision been made? Okay,
It's very rough still.
okay.
Molly? Okay. My only question, or my only comment on this is I think it's great that we're doing this with the country club. We have 4 members of this body that live in the country club?
It's not just Country Club. This was the
Drive.
initiative, but there are a few
Okay.
other streets, I believe, Seabrook,
Okay.
the Country Club, and Tequesta
Well,
Drive were the three.
Well, I'm gonna move beyond that and say, I think we should have a shade tree initiative that encapsulates the entire village. Because when you read this, okay, the country club makes up a certain portion of this community, but if I'm reading this from the outside and I'm reading this, I'm saying, well, wait a minute, what about the rest of Tequesta? So if that's true, then I think we need to retitle this, but I think that there should be a shade tree initiative. I mean, Mr. Bradford's talked about this, the benefit of the shade trees from an environmental perspective, but I think that benefit inures to the entire community, and I think we need to broaden our perspective on this and take into account the entire community.
Okay.
That's my thought.
I agree with that. I know the EAC originally looked at Country Club Drive, not as a neighborhood road, but that's a main road that a
Right.
lot of people take down. And then also they looked at Tequesta Drive, and ideally, they'd love to see it down Old Dixie, and that's kind of a part of Lanier Park,
Yeah.
which we are discussing as well in the near future. So that's on my radar. And then we have down Seabrook too, and I think the Seabrook ones went in later than the Country Club Drive ones, so those are okay still, I guess.
Okay.
But I mean, I support a beautiful canopy anywhere.
No, I agree.
It's hot, it's sunny, and it's beautiful, and it makes us unique, because when you drive anywhere else, you don't see that
Yep.
that much.
Okay, next item is the carbon footprint. Any thoughts, comments on this initiative?
All power to her.
Have we, regarding the charging stations, Jeremy, you had originally mentioned that the ones that they were being proposed for the recreation center were the slow charge. We were looking into the fast charge. I know there was a cost associated with that. Have we had any further discussions with FPNL about?
Yeah, they don't offer that program. We had a vendor lined up, but we were having some, we'll say, disagreements with the legal language. They wouldn't change their contract, so
Okay.
we're back looking for another vendor. They wouldn't change the language based on what Keith advised them, so.
Okay.
The sites are being prepared for basically being ready for any vendor, so that part won't matter. So we'll continue to look for another vendor.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay. Water system upgrades. Again, I know we've covered these at the various workshops and council meetings. Are there any other thoughts, comments on any of these items?
Thank you, Matt.
Good job, Matt. Good job with you and your staff and your team. Stormwater system upgrades. Okay. The reliable water supply, again, that all falls under the same umbrella. Okay, and that covers it. Any other thoughts, comments, and concluding our discussion on the strategic plan?
It's not necessarily on the strategic plan, but because, before we move on to the next agenda item, because we were talking about the bridge, I get a lot of phone calls lately from boaters, and they can see all the barges and the cranes starting to pop up, and they're all kind of inquiring, oh, what about boaters? Like, are we going to go under when they tear down the bridge? Is there going to be a method of going past? And I feel like maybe there has been a lack of information and education for the boater aspect. And I don't know if that comes from FDOT or our team, but if we could just help them out too, because that's right where everyone takes that curve, and it kind of makes sense.
Okay.
I mean, it's bad enough that railroad bridge is always down.
So
But at
that can be
least-
part of our communication efforts around
Sure,
the whole bridge
yeah.
issue, right?
I mean, I get it, when you're on the boat and they have a lot of stuff out there now, and it looks overwhelming, and then you get nervous to go under, because you don't know if you're allowed to, there's no banner, there's no sign, it's all for the roads and driving, but not really much for the marine aspect. That is all.
Well, I know there's no intent to shut down the intercoastal waterway, but.
No,
again,
but I get
But
that.
to your point.
Especially with
it
young
would be
boaters,
helpful,
you know,
yeah.
if they're running around down there and you see, once they get started, there's no bridge and they're banging and drilling and doing whatever, I could see how that could be intimidating for a new boater or a young boater, and what do I do? Just maybe we have to educate them, stay in the channel,
Yeah.
it is allowed, or whatever we need to get out there.
Would that be something we'd want FDOT to address? Or if we're gonna have a meeting like this, should we have the Coast Guard come in and maybe address the waterway issue?
I don't know
I
who
don't know
would be.
thoughts. I don't know if it's necessary, but I'm just throwing it out as an idea.
I just figure, I just figure we need to add that element, because we're always talking about above it and the detours for vehicles, but we
Yeah.
can't forget that there's traffic
Yeah.
underneath the bridge.
I think we could start with FDOT and, because it was the same contractor too, and
Yeah.
see what they did at Southern.
Then fine, maybe they've done this before, so they have to
Yeah.
have a comfort level of
Yeah.
what they're comfortable with, having boats go nearby.
Okay. Any other comments, Jeremy? Okay, well, we'll close on this item then, and we're going to move on to the mutual aid and assistance agreement with Palm Beach County Fire and Rescue.
So this agreement's been in place for going on 10 years. It's set to expire at the end of September, on September 30th, 2022. So this is what we've prepared as an amendment to this Palm Beach County Fire agreement to provide fire service for Palm Beach County. What we've done is we've taken the taxable value and the current millage rate, including depreciation of vehicles, and came up with a millage rate of 2.6637, and then multiplied times taxable value. So that's how we get the 259,121, and then of course the maintenance cost of $70,000. This is an amendment. Currently, I believe we receive like 208, and so this would be an increase to that. And then we would still continue with a 3% escalation or a cost of living every year. And so what we're looking for this is just kind of if there's any other guidance that you want to provide this before we really start having the deep conversations with Palm Beach County on amending this.
Molly, I'll start with you.
Mine's just probably more educational since I'm not super savvy with these amendments. You know, the 10 years and then the 3% increase each year, is that kind of boilerplate, what's always done, or is like current economic factors taken into account?
So this is the way the contract's been written, got written 10 years ago, and so we kept that language. But we can amend it however you, or, you know, negotiate however you feel.
Or will we be covered? No, I mean, we know what the economy is now. It's volatile, inflation's crazy. Who knows what's going to happen? I'm not an economist, but I'm just saying, has like any of that been taken into account?
So, I mean,
Or is it a
I mean,
moot
that one's-
point?
I don't know if it's a moot point. I mean, obviously our costs go up for providing fire service to the residents, you know, every year. I think 3%'s been a kind of a rate. It's actually been, before we threw in depreciation, if you were to take the 10 years, we started at $180,000, went 3%, and the contract rate is 208. If we would have took what our residents pay over that 10-year period, I mean, it was like super close. It's kind of almost, it was almost scary how close it came out over a 10-year period of what's actual versus what was projected to come out. But obviously the only part that was missing was the depreciation of the vehicle cost. So we're capturing that now that we didn't capture before. I feel like it's you know, I think it's a good starting point to negotiate and see how they handle it. I did hear that they were considering putting a station over here while the bridge was down and working on that. You know, if they put a station over there, it's possible they won't amend this agreement. And then we're not gonna have $208,000. So, you know, I was just very cognizant to make sure it's a fair, you know, a fair proposal for them.
I think if you go back over the last 10 years and you look at what the inflation rate has been, 3% turned out to be a very fair number. But you're right, you're in a different economic situation right now. And to Jeremy's point though, we also, it is in our interest to continue to service these areas and maintain this relationship. So we could go, clearly if we use 3% and inflation remains as high as it is now, that's not going to be equitable from our vantage point. You could go to a CPI approach and say, whatever the CPI is, that's what the adjustment's going to be. If you believe that the CPI reflects the actual cost impacts
Exactly.
to you know, the department. Now that's another question. But then again, obviously, if inflation goes back down to 1 or 2%, well, then you'd be looking at 1 or 2% at that point in time. So it's, I don't know that there's an absolute right or wrong here. It's just, it's a judgment call in terms of what do you think, looking forward over a 10-year period of time, what's reasonable? And then you've got a party on the other side, and you are hoping that party is going to want to continue this relationship. I think it's, to this point, it's worked well for both sides. So we want to, we're going to ask them for more now in resetting the base level. But as we go forward, is that 3% sufficient?
That was my comment, just making sure we're covered.
Yeah, I mean, it's a judgment call. Like I said, there's no absolute right or wrong on this. And the other thing we've talked about too is seeing with the bridge going down, if we can maybe expand the service areas and generate some additional revenues. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Jeremy, at this point. Whether you think that's likely or not.
We haven't even started conversation, but I think it's, it's worthy of a conversation. It may save them some money, and it may help them, but so we can have that conversation. Ultimately, you guys will have to approve whatever we come back with, but we can offer that as an additional service as long as it, the chief feels that we're not gonna have to, add additional staff and equipment and things like that. That would be costly, but as long as we can provide the service with the current level of service that we provide. We did look at the calls for service for these areas, and it's minimal. I mean, we're talking about between the three areas, 7-8%, 6% of our calls over a year. So it's not. That's about the share that we're asking for, was 7 or 8%, or whatever that number was.
And if you look at it from that standpoint, in terms of the total budget for fire rescue, then again, what's on the table here is pretty reasonable from our standpoint.
That was my only comment.
Okay. If there's no further, we'll start to have negotiations, or not negotiations, just conversations about amending this, and as we get any information, we can share that with you guys. You guys provide feedback.
Everybody comfortable with the idea of looking to see if we can, again, for corresponding or compensating costs, seeing if they're willing with the bridge going down to see if we can expand the service area at this point in time?
I mean, I like to include Chief in with that conversation.
Yeah, no, he will. I mean, I'm just saying, but as a group, as a council, are we comfortable?
I'm comfortable, whatever keeps our residents safe, if we have them covered. So make sure that they're covered, and that we aren't waiting 20 minutes for service to come.
Okay.
When does this have to be agreed upon by? I know it's on here, but.
September 30th.
Next year.
Oh, so we have.
Or this year, I'm sorry, 20.
But it's in our best interest to start now,
Oh,
budget
yeah.
process, their budget process, we wanna, make sure that they're accounting for it, we're accounting for it.
Because even if we weren't, if we didn't have trains down or running, I mean, my concern with the bridge, not just that it's not there when it's being built, but we have traffic. So, I mean, my concern is even for our guys, I think we want to get to that east side and get through some of that traffic that's gonna be built up during some of the peak hours. That's why I keep pushing on FDOT to make sure they're watching those lights or have a better system on the truck to really get that traffic moving. Again, I will support whatever keeps our residents getting a quick response. That way they aren't stuck with that one call where you just need to be there.
Is there any update on that? I know FDOT and Chief were looking into the device that you put on the truck, but they had to make sure it was compatible with the cabinets they were installing. Is there any update?
Let me see if I can get you an update. I haven't stayed in tune with that. I know that we're not behind on it. There's some work still being done, so we still got time to make all that work.
And that really just stresses me out, because if you've ever seen, and it happens in DeQuesta, if you're at a red light waiting to turn and they're coming down, in our little village, they have trouble getting across. People just don't stop. And they're blaring the horn and they're bright yellow, and people still are just like, nope, I'm gonna keep going. It drives me crazy.
And there could be ways to address that too. I mean, if you had to, if you had to have a police escort, and you ticket people if they don't get out of the way. I mean, if you had to take aggressive action to ensure that,
No, I'll give credit to Officer Loney. I have seen him when he was on patrol. He would fly down and pull those people
Yeah.
over. And good for him.
yeah, so if that is a problem, as you're describing, and it continues to be a problem, then we'd have to take aggressive action.
Ask our crew because they'll tell you it is a problem.
Okay,
And it's in the Tequesta lines.
okay.
They, they're just trying to do their job and help people, and unfortunately, we have vehicle drivers now that just don't care. And we're gonna be we constantly are talking about that traffic. We need to be aware that it's gonna be there, so.
Okay.
Anything we can do to, again, make sure that we have available services, whether it's over here, over there, if it's our guys,
Yeah.
if it's their guys, whatever. Let's just make sure we're covered.
So Jeremy, you're gonna move it forward, and you'll just keep us informed as the conversations take place. Okay, moving on to the last item of the evening, the revised purchasing policy. Jeremy, I'm gonna turn this over to you.
And I'll ask for Hugh's, a little bit of Hugh's help on this, but I just a little bit of background. Hugh and his team kind of worked on this for several months. We've been talking about it. Hugh has put together what I feel is a very good revised policy. I think you guys have a copy of our older one. This one's much more detailed. It does include, Mr. Stone brought it up previously, so he was able to put it in there fairly quickly, but a local vendor preference program does provide a bid protest procedures. As you know, that was relatively not too long ago. We got hit with one of those, and so this clarifies that process. It also provides clarification on who has authority to approve change orders, provides for us to be able to suspend or reinstate vendors, and then it also discusses the cone of silence. But I think the whole document is a lot more detailed, and this is an internal, mostly internal document for staff, and so council basically ultimately approves policy.
Thoughts and comments?
I had two questions. Whoops, what sheet is this? Is the purchasing threshold? Under exemptions, the maybe. I like to avoid maybes when possible. Can you, and I read the asterisk exemptions, can you just kind of explain what a maybe purchase order required would be for? Like, give an example.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. So when specifically is a purchase order required? $10,000 is the triggering point at which the department has to requisition or put in for a purchase order. And that's also the point at which they have to have written documentation that at least 3 quotes were obtained from the vendor.
So under exemptions, what would be an example of someone being exempt from a purchase order? Because it just says maybe, I just want to understand
Yeah,
that.
an exemption would be like, say, health insurance, payment, utilities, things that are ordinary payroll,
Okay, got
debt
it.
service, things that were already pre-approved by the council, and that were routine expenditures that would kind of dictate that those items were approved before the expenditure. So debt service, utilities, payroll, health insurance, benefit payments, and things of that nature
Got
would
it.
be excluded.
Thank you.
Yep.
And then my only other comment was, which header, this is under the local business preference program. Number 3, can that be defined a little bit more? It seems very subjective the way it's written.
Number 3, let me quickly go here.
Unless I missed it elsewhere, is there like more of a,
You're right, there aren't specifications as to what constitutes a local business.
yeah, so I just didn't, it might be
What constitutes what, I'm sorry?
a local business?
We have it defined in the definition.
Yeah, so the definition of a
okay.
local business is a business that has in hand a valid business tax receipt within 1 year of when we put out the request for a proposal or the RFQ or ITB. So basically, they have to have been here. We have kind of a requirement that they're invested in the village. And that kind of prohibits entities from setting up shop the evening before and then bidding on a contract. So it gives us some degree of assurance that the business was already within the village and operating. And
Great,
it's in the
I missed the
definition
cross-reference
section.
with the definition, thank you. And then I guess I really like the local business, I think it's great to be able to support our local businesses. Have other municipalities done this, is the percentage reasonable, I just wanna make sure. I don't know.
He probably has
Yes,
better
it's a
background.
standard practice.
Great.
The only caveat is if the procurement is going to be funded by a federal grant, we cannot use this provision. That's the only caveat.
Lori, any thoughts?
I'm good.
Yes, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute. Although I'm very much in favor of supporting local businesses, but I want to throw out a couple of questions. Does this kind of clause, which allows a local business to see what the lowest cost was from a responsive non-local business, result in responsive non-local businesses not wanting to come in and compete? Because if they do, each time, the local business is then given an opportunity to come back and get a second whack at or second bite of the apple. Can that adversely affect interested parties in bidding on projects or business or activities that we have?
That's a good question, and that's why we set the parameters kind of within reason. It's 5% differential, and so it doesn't necessarily knock out the non-local business. If it's an invitation to bid, what it does, it gives a local business an opportunity to present a best and final offer. So we're not saying we're going to choose a local business per se. We're saying if you're within 5% of the bid, of the non-local bid, we're going to give you an opportunity to come up with a best and final offer.
But they're not gonna see the low bid.
Oh, they
They
will.
will after we have posted the,
Oh, they will see the low bid.
yeah, when we post, well, what happened is what's gonna happen is we will send out a best and final offer. They won't see it
Yeah,
per se,
okay.
but they'll get another opportunity to bid.
But the best and
Before
final, but the best and final offer will only go to the local business, the way I read this.
Yes,
So if you get it, you already know you're within 5% of whatever the low offer was, even if you don't have the exact dollar amount, because
Yeah.
you're being asked to submit a best and final offer. So my question is, if somebody comes in and bids $1 million on a project and the business bids $1,050,000, okay, now they can come in and say, okay, I know that I'm within 5%. Okay, so if I'm at $1,050,000, I know that other businesses, if I go to $1 million, I'm gonna be at a tie and I'm gonna win. My concern is, does that discourage any non-local responsive businesses from coming in and competing? Because they're gonna say, well, wait a minute, I don't have that opportunity. I don't have an opportunity to put in a best and final offer, but the people I'm competing with on a local level do. So I'm saying, I want to help the local businesses, but I don't want to hurt the village and I don't want to hurt our taxpayers. So that's why I'm asking the question, how has this worked in practice in other communities, and how has it affected the willingness of other, again, non-local responsive businesses to come in and compete for our business?
it works pretty well. I've been involved with bids where, RFPs as well, where what we typically do for, the bids are one thing, but the RFPs, we're gonna add a percentage point to the local vendor. And they pretty much know they know this coming into the solicitation, that there's a local vendor preference, and so there is no major upheaval. From most of the bids that I've dealt with, it's already codified in our policies and procedures, and they know what they're going up against. And usually, if we state the reason, we're going to state that tacitly, that the local vendor was given an opportunity to make a best and final offer, or if it's an RFP process, it's going to be very transparent, where we show that we're adding 5% to the non-local vendor. So usually the participants are well aware of the process, so we usually don't have any
No,
blowback.
I'm not saying they're not aware of it. I'm just saying, does that in any way discourage anyone?
No,
Okay, that's-
I haven't had from
And of
dealing with bids.
of all the contracts we put out, do we have any idea what percentage of those are actually bid upon by local businesses?
I haven't
across the
collected
board?
that information. I know that there have been a few that we have had
Okay.
significant interest from local businesses, but we haven't really collected that data.
Okay, all right. Again, I would suggest that this be considered by the entire council, not just,
Oh, yeah, we're not approving
Yeah.
tonight, it'll bring back to council for approval.
For approval,
As
okay.
council approves policy, and we're not
Right.
approving anything tonight.
okay. Any other thoughts, comments?
Mm-hmm.
All right, you ready to go home?
Just, well, one other thing Jeremy handed out in the packet,
Oh, okay, yeah, you did hand this out after, yes.
the saving, is this the savings from Paradise Park? But it's page 2, I don't,
Correct,
I like the savings,
yeah.
because we're not spending it.
so you wanna give some context what this is?
So this is, per Ms. Young's request, she asked for us to come up with a cumulative list of savings that we would have from not renewing the lease at Paradise Park. And so from the lease, we budgeted $44,000 after making the 2 payments to get us through November. We're at $34,726 remaining for the lease portion of that. And then we've had we will have some savings or projected savings from water utilities, landscape maintenance, electric service, and general maintenance to the park of $14,700. So we have a total savings from the Paradise Park lease not being extended of $49,426. There was, Ms. Young asked for maybe to have conversations about what we can do with those funds. Obviously, number one is you can always, capture that and, have a conversation about a project. And so we've listed some projects that may be interest to the council. You can also, take and just add toward your reserves and, a larger project later. So we provided this information for you guys to have some consideration.
I'll look through these in time, but not to get into conversation, but I just have a quick question. The median on Old Dixie, what side of Old Dixie? The north or the south? The north side, right?
So there was reference Mr. Bradford again, getting a lot of credit. He put together a plan. I don't know how long ago he gave it to me, but a little over a year ago. There was a plan for a median there. Where it comes really into play, I think, would be part of the conversation while I wanted added is, Old Dixie's already pretty fast, and we're gonna have some traffic cutting through. I think it'll provide some road diet, some traffic calming if we were able to do something like that. Obviously, the aesthetics, as we talk about a tree canopy along Old Dixie as well. So this is a project we don't have currently planned in our 5-year capital. So if we are talking about keeping that funds more of a green space park type fund, that's why the option came up.
I love this list, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you, but I'll pick through these in time.
And I think the idea of the median in Old Dixie, and there's plenty of room for it as you travel that road. The one caveat there is Old Dixie is a county road, and we've talked previously about reaching out to the county. We even talked about taking over ownership of the road, but not without the county providing the necessary funding to bring the road up to what we would consider appropriate standards, so.
Sure, and I'm sure we could have a huge discussion on that. I just was curious
Yeah.
where on Old Dixie.
No, the only reason I'm bringing that up is I think it is a great idea, and I think it is something worth pursuing, and if the council ultimately decides they want to pursue this, then I think we need to open up a channel back with the county again to see what we can do. Get them to either foot the, carry the cost of this, or talk about, again, the transition of the road over, but with appropriate funding. Yes, Doug?
If I could just say one thing, Palm Beach County is planning on repaving that road from Old Dixie between the county line and A1A after the bridge project.
Okay, so this might be an opportune time.
The next 3 years, the next 2 years, but they pushed it off because of traffic flow that's going to be coming down Old Dixie.
Okay.
Good
So-
request, Molly.
So it'd be a nice time to
Begin to have,
start that conversation.
yeah, have those conversations. But I agree with you, Lori, I like the list.
It's nice to see what we have going on, coming up.
Okay. Any other thoughts, Molly, anything else? All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
How do you, let me just ask this, so how do you want to proceed with that particular initiative, Molly? What's your vision for that? Like, have another workshop to discuss these items after you guys have a chance to chew on them?
Yeah,
Is that
because
what
I
you
think we all just, this is the first time we're all seeing them, and I think
Okay.
council members aren't here, need to make sure they know what this is and see it, and yeah, maybe the next workshop or two,
Okay.
have it on the agenda again.
Okay, yep.
And I was gonna say, if the workshop agenda, are any of these things, Jeremy, from your vantage point, something that you would want to move forward with quickly, or if we can't get on the next workshop, it's fine, if it gets delayed, deferred another month or two, or do we want to fit it into a council meeting?
Yeah, I don't think any of those were time sensitive. If they
Okay.
were, we would probably already pulled the trigger on them. I think these are, as we've talked about, taking that money and continuing with green space, that's been a very hot topic lately, and so that's where these have come from, but I don't think any of them are. Obviously there's, a sidewalk grinder, we could do so much if we had one of those. We can pick and choose each one of these on why they're important, and, the sooner you get it, the better you are, but, none of them has to be done right away.
The only one I was looking at that I thought maybe had some time element to it, given the construction that's ongoing, was the crosswalk station near the community center. Because if you were gonna do that, it would seem to make sense to do that as part of the completion of that project.
I thought we were already doing that.
We talked about it.
Well, they had some plans put in there, but we were gonna do that in-house, so I'm working with Doug. There's some, we'll say, physical constraints over there, because you're gonna be talking about a because where the rec center is sitting, you're gonna be talking about a mid-block crossing right now over there. And so Doug and I we're mulling that still, because we're gonna probably have to get somebody to look at that for us, so there'll be some costs associated with that, so.
So maybe out of this list-
They never came up with the construction plans per se in there, because we were gonna do it ourselves, but now there's quite a few obstacles that we're trying to jump through right now.
So this is for one on Seabrook, obviously,
Seabrook,
not
yes.
for,
So maybe out of this list, that's the one item that we don't defer too far into the future, that maybe we look at this a little quicker.
We can look at that, and then if it's time sensitive and we can do it sooner, we'll bring that to you guys and at that point. So give us
Okay.
a little bit of time.
All right, sounds good. Okay, now can I have a motion to?
Make a motion to adjourn?
adjourn?
second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.